Have you ever stopped to think about what it really means to be weak? Not in the physical sense, but in the psychological, intimate sense. Is weakness just a harmless condition, a trait that arouses compassion, or does it carry something darker, capable of eroding confidence and happiness? Friedrich Nietzsche believed that weakness is more than a limitation. It is a trap, an invisible force that leads people to mask the truth, to hide their powerlessness behind fabricated moralities. Imagine a friend who always seems kind, but whose help is never genuine. Or a person who insists on playing the victim, manipulating others to cover up their own flaws. Nietzsche saw this as a form of dishonesty rooted in weakness. He believed that, deep down, being weak is rejecting life, avoiding the truth, and embracing a mask that disconnects us from reality. But where does this idea come from? And what does it reveal about our society and ourselves? For Nietzsche, weakness is not just an individual problem, but a contagious force that threatens what we hold most dear, our ability to live authentically. Nietzsche did not see weakness as a mere human trait, but as the foundation of one of the greatest mechanisms of manipulation ever created, morality. For him, weakness was the origin of resentment, a bitter feeling that arises when people, unable to face their limitations, seek to blame others for their dissatisfaction. The philosopher identified this in the creation of slave morality, an inversion of values that exalts suffering, humility, and submission, while demonizing strength, power, and autonomy. But what exactly is resentment? Imagine someone who does not have the courage to admit their envy of another's success. Instead, this person criticizes the merits of others, calling them arrogance or greed. This process of demeaning the strong to justify one's own impotence is the heart of resentment. For Nietzsche, it is in this space that weakness becomes dishonest. Instead of admitting their inability to achieve something, the weak create a narrative in which their limitations are virtues. This slave morality opposes the morality of the masters, which values strength, courage, and self-assertion. While the masters create their own values, the slaves react, constructing ethical systems that place them as pure and the powerful as sinners. Christianity, according to Nietzsche, was the most notable example of this inversion of values. He believed that religion promoted weakness as an ideal, exalting suffering and humility while condemning pride and self-sufficiency. Of course, this does not mean that Nietzsche despised the weak simply because they were weak. He despised their choice to mask their weakness with illusions, transforming it into a corrosive force. For him, the problem was not human frailty, but the refusal to face it honestly. But why is this choice for dishonesty so common? Why is it easier to create a mask than to accept reality? To understand this, we need to delve into the psychology of weakness and its link to dishonest behavior. For the author of Beyond Good and Evil, weakness is not just a passive condition. It is active, insidious, and tends to manifest itself in behaviors that distort the truth and sabotage human relationships. According to the German thinker, when someone recognizes their limitations, two choices arise: to accept their own vulnerability and seek to overcome it, or to deny this weakness and project it onto the outside world. It is in this second path that dishonesty arises. From a psychological point of view, this translates into the fear of facing one's own failure. Imagine a person who constantly avoids challenges but justifies this by blaming others or circumstances. For Friedrich Nietzsche, this evasion of responsibility is a defense mechanism that protects the ego, but which, in the long run, fuels resentment. And what happens when resentment takes over? The weak individual becomes a master of manipulation. He uses self-pity to attract support, disguises his envy as morality, and blames those in positions of power for his unhappiness. This pattern creates a cycle in which weakness not only persists but spreads. After all, as the critic of Christian morality observed, it is easier to seek comfort in a narrative that portrays the other as the villain than to face one's own powerlessness. But what is the cost of this choice? For Nietzsche, denying reality has profound consequences. First, it impedes personal growth. Someone who refuses to acknowledge their own limits will never be able to overcome them. Second, it erodes trust. People who constantly manipulate and mask the truth lose credibility in relationships. Finally, it weakens society as a whole. The philosopher saw weakness as a contagious force, capable of creating entire cultures based on resentment and self-sabotage. A practical example can be seen in the corporate environment. Consider that colleague who never admits his mistakes but is always ready to criticize the work of others. This behavior not only generates distrust, but also destabilizes the team. Ruckin's thinkers saw this dynamic as a miniature version of society. When many choose dishonesty as a strategy, weakness becomes a virus, weakening the collective. However, the critic of modernity did not believe that this condition was inevitable. For him, human beings have the potential to transcend their weakness as long as they abandon illusions and accept reality as it is. And this is where the notion of strength comes in, not as something brutal or oppressive, but as the courage to face life without masks. This courage is what separates the weak from the strong. But what does it mean, in practice, to be strong? How can we cultivate this inner strength in a world that seems to reward manipulation and self-deception? For the philosopher who challenged moral conventions, dishonesty is the most evident reflection of weakness. When a person does not have the strength necessary to confront their limitations, they resort to falsehood, both to themselves and to others. This strategy creates a toxic cycle. By hiding one's vulnerability, the individual not only perpetuates his or her difficulties, but also destroys the confidence that could help him or her overcome them. Nietzsche observed this dynamic critically, especially as it manifested itself in the morality of the time. He saw religion, especially Christianity, as a grand theater of collective dishonesty. According to the thinker in Human All Too Human, the weak project their incapacity as virtue, extolling characteristics such as humility and submission, while condemning qualities that they cannot achieve, such as pride and self-sufficiency. This mechanism, for him, not only deceives others, but also alienates the individual from his or her own essence. Think, for example, of someone who insists on justifying their failures with phrases such as, "I was unlucky," or "people are against me." Behind this narrative is the refusal to admit mistakes or limitations. For the critic of traditional morality, this kind of self-deception is not harmless. It is a barrier to self-knowledge and a seed of resentment. This dishonesty also has profound effects on relationships. Imagine being in a friendship or partnership with someone who is never honest about their intentions or feelings. Little by little, this lack of clarity erodes trust, creating an environment of distrust and insecurity. For the author of The Genealogy of Morals, dishonest weakness is one of the most corrosive forces in any human bond. It not only creates conflict, but also prevents authentic relationships from flourishing. Furthermore, Nietzsche argued that the dishonesty generated by weakness is not limited to individuals. It can take on collective proportions, influencing political, cultural, and social systems. One example is when entire societies are based on narratives that avoid individual responsibility, such as the glorification of suffering as a path to virtue, or the idea that all problems come from external factors. This type of collective thinking not only impedes progress, but also perpetuates a culture of dependence and self-deception. However, the thinker did not propose that everyone simply abandon their weaknesses. He recognized that vulnerability is part of the human condition. What he condemned was the choice to hide this vulnerability through dishonest masks. For him, the true path to strength begins with the radical acceptance of reality, however uncomfortable it may be. After all, how can one build an authentic life if it is based on illusions? For the German philosopher, the first step to breaking this cycle is to cultivate the courage to look within and face the truths we try to avoid. Only then can weakness be transformed into genuine strength. But in the modern world, where competition and social media encourage appearances, how can we identify and resist these dishonest tendencies? Is there still room for inner strength in such a superficial environment? For Nietzsche, strength is not just a physical attribute or a display of external power. It is a virtue deeply rooted in the ability to embrace life in its entirety, even in the midst of difficulties and imperfections. For the author of The Antichrist, being strong means facing reality with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to self-knowledge. But what characterizes this strength? First, it requires a conscious rejection of self-deception. While the weak seek to justify their limitations with excuses or constructed morality, the strong accept their weaknesses as part of the process of growth. This act of honesty with oneself is, paradoxically, what allows one to overcome limitations. Second, strength implies action. It is not enough to recognize reality, one must act upon it. For the critic of modernity, strength is demonstrated in difficult decisions, in the ability to adapt to adverse situations, and in the willingness to take risks to achieve significant goals. The German thinker saw this dynamic in historical figures who stood out for their ability to transform difficulties into opportunities. For example, consider someone like Leonardo da Vinci, whose strength lay not only in his exceptional talent, but also in his tireless pursuit of knowledge and self-improvement. He is an example of how strength can be a transformative virtue, inspiring not only individual achievements but also advances for all humanity. Furthermore, for Nietzsche, strength is closely linked to creation. Rather than simply reacting to circumstances, the strong are those who create new values, new ways of life, and new possibilities. The author of Thus Spoke Zarathustra argued that true strength lies in the ability to shape one's own destiny, rejecting conventions that limit human potential. But how does this apply to everyday life? Imagine a person who, after years of dissatisfaction in a stagnant job, decides to abandon the security of a steady salary to pursue a personal passion. This act, although risky, is an expression of strength, a commitment to authenticity and the search for something more meaningful. On the other hand, strength should not be confused with oppression or tyranny. Nietzsche often criticized the strong, who use their power to subjugate others. For him, true strength is generative, not destructive. It is the ability to inspire and uplift rather than crush. This distinction is fundamental to understanding the German philosopher's thinking. In a world full of distractions and external pressures, cultivating this inner strength can seem like a monumental challenge. Yet Nietzsche believed that it is within reach for anyone willing to let go of the victim mentality and take control of their lives. This requires, above all, a willingness to question narratives imposed by society, religion, or culture. As the thinker often emphasized, true strength is not something that can be given or passively learned. It must be earned, an ongoing act of will that requires effort and sacrifice. And it is in this process that the beauty of life lies. The possibility of constant transformation, of reinventing oneself, and of striving for excellence in all aspects. Thus, strength for the philosopher is more than a virtue, it is a calling. An invitation to abandon mediocrity and embrace a more fulfilling and authentic existence. But are we ready to accept this challenge? Nietzsche believed that true respect can only emerge from authentic strength. For him, it is not about physical strength or domination, but about a magnetic presence that comes from someone who lives in alignment with their essence. This kind of strength attracts admiration, while weakness, often hidden by masks, generates distrust and even contempt. When someone demonstrates genuine strength, it is as if they are a beacon in the darkness. Think, for example, of historical figures who have shaped generations, such as Mahatma Gandhi. Although his path was one of nonviolence, he radiated an inner strength so powerful that he defied empires and inspired millions. For Nietzsche, it is this authenticity that demands respect because it reflects courage, integrity, and the ability to transcend mediocrity. But respect is not just about being admired by others. It also involves self-respect. When someone is strong enough to be honest with themselves and act in accordance with their values, that individual experiences a profound kind of personal dignity. This self-worth is, in itself, a pillar of strength and a catalyst for gaining external respect. However, there is a subtle trap here. Many seek respect artificially, trying to impress or manipulate others. Nietzsche despised this approach, considering it yet another manifestation of weakness. For the author of Ecce Homo, genuine respect cannot be demanded or forced. It is earned by the consistency between who a person is and what they demonstrate to the world. In the modern context, this lesson is particularly relevant. In a world where authenticity is often sacrificed for likes and instant validation, authentic respect becomes a rare currency. The inner strength that Nietzsche so valued is the key to navigating these external pressures without compromising one's essence. In the end, respect is more than a consequence of strength. It is a reflection of a life lived with purpose and integrity. Are we ready to shed the masks we wear and earn genuine respect, starting with our own? Compassion, often celebrated as an essential virtue in modern society, is, for Nietzsche, a weakness in disguise. At the heart of the philosopher's thinking is the idea that pity, while often well-intentioned, can breed dependency and perpetuate weakness, creating a cycle of vulnerability that can corrode the human spirit. For the philosopher, compassion is an emotional response that, rather than empowering, often infantilizes those on the receiving end. This dynamic is particularly evident in how societies treat the underprivileged. Rather than empowering individuals to rise up and become self-sufficient, pity can transform dependency into a state of being. Nietzsche saw this as a betrayal of the true nature of human beings, which is the pursuit of self-affirmation and personal power. Imagine a situation in which a person faced with financial hardship receives help in a paternalistic manner. The intention may be noble, but the underlying message is, you cannot overcome this alone. This approach not only undermines self-confidence, but also prevents the development of skills needed to face future challenges. Instead of becoming an active force in one's own life, the individual finds himself trapped in a cycle of dependency, analogous to a child who never learns to walk on his own. Nietzsche's critique of compassion is not merely an attack on human goodness. He challenges the very nature of morality. For him, traditional morality, which often glorifies pity, serves as a mechanism of social control, creating a hierarchy that valorizes weakness. Those who consider themselves virtuous often feel superior when they offer compassion, not realizing that they are actually fueling weakness rather than combating it. It is essential to realize that Nietzsche's critique of pity does not suggest that we should not help others. On the contrary, he argues that helping should be a form of empowerment. True compassion, in Nietzsche's view, should inspire others to become stronger, to rise up, and to take control of their lives. Rather than providing support that reinforces vulnerability, we should seek support that encourages self-confidence and agency. Furthermore, the fragility of pity is manifested in the way it is often used as a tool of manipulation. People can use compassion as a form of emotional control, creating an environment where weakness is exploited for personal gain. Such manipulation is a reflection of weakness, not strength. Nietzsche reminds us that true strength is revealed in the ability to cope with life without resorting to emotional appeals that devalue the autonomy of others. As we approach the issue of pity in our daily interactions, it is crucial to reflect on our intentions. Are we truly empowering others or simply satisfying our need to feel good? This self-analysis may be uncomfortable, but it is a necessary step in breaking out of the dynamics of dependency that Nietzsche so critically exposes. Thus, Nietzsche's critique of compassion and pity invites us to re-examine not only our actions, but also the morality that underlies them. True strength lies in recognizing that every human being has the capacity to rise up, and that true help is that which fosters this capacity. How can we transform our interactions into opportunities to foster strength and autonomy, rather than reinforcing fragility and dependence? At the heart of Nietzsche's thought is the idea that life must be affirmed in all its complexities and contradictions. Self-affirmation, a central virtue in his philosophy, is seen as an act of courage that involves accepting life in its entirety, including its pains and challenges. Contrary to the pessimistic view that many philosophies adopt, Nietzsche proposes a love of life that transcends mere survival and becomes a celebration of existence. Self-affirmation, for the philosopher, is a reflection of inner strength. It's the ability to say yes to life, even when it presents seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Instead of taking refuge in illusions or allowing themselves to be dominated by weakness, the self-affirming individual faces challenges head-on. This attitude is fundamental not only for personal growth, but also for building a stronger and more resilient society. Nietzsche believed that by embracing our struggles and failures, we become more authentic. Weakness dissipates when we accept that we are imperfect beings, with abilities and limitations. This acceptance is a powerful act of self-affirmation, as it allows us to navigate life honestly. Instead of using compassion as an escapism mechanism, self-affirmation pushes us to actively seek solutions to our problems. A practical example of this virtue can be found in stories of people who overcame great adversity. Think of Nelson Mandela, who spent years in prison, but instead of being consumed by resentment, he emerged as a leader who not only asserted himself, but also sought to assert the dignity of his people. Your ability to embrace life and fight for a better future is a powerful testimony to the virtue of self-affirmation. At the same time, Nietzsche criticizes society's tendency to glorify weakness and victimization. He notes that this glorification not only undermines the potential of individuals, but also weakens society as a whole. When you value weakness, you create a culture of passivity that doesn't encourage growth or innovation. Instead of inspiring people to become protagonists of their own stories, a cycle of dependence and mediocrity is perpetuated. In this context, the love of life becomes a call to action. Nietzsche urges us to embrace our individuality and seek self-affirmation as a way of living fully. This involves not only accepting our challenges, but also learning to love them, recognizing that they are an integral part of our journey. Each obstacle overcome is an opportunity for growth, a testament to our inner strength, and a reason to celebrate life in all its complexity. Finally, self-affirmation and love of life lead us to reflect on how we can contribute to a stronger and more resilient world. If each of us commits to affirming our own lives, to creating a space where strength and authenticity are valued, we will not only improve ourselves, but also inspire those around us. The question we must ask ourselves is, are we ready to embrace life in its entirety and become agents of change in a world that often values weakness? Nietzsche's philosophy is not limited to the individual. It also offers a blueprint for building a more robust and authentic society. The philosopher's legacy invites us to question the prevailing values that shape our interactions and social structures. In a world that often prioritizes conformity and mediocrity, Nietzsche's vision urges us to build communities based on strength, honesty, and self-affirmation. For Nietzsche, a strong society is one that values the diversity and uniqueness of its members. Rather than promoting homogeneity, it is vital to encourage individual expression and the pursuit of excellence. This emphasis on individuality is crucial because each person brings with them a wealth of experiences and perspectives that, when recognized, contribute to the strengthening of the whole. Society becomes a vibrant mosaic of talents and abilities where each individual can thrive and excel. However, building a strong society requires courage and a challenge to establish norms. Nietzsche criticizes conventional morality that often seeks to level differences in the name of equality. This tendency not only devalues individual potential, but also creates an environment that inhibits creativity and innovation. Instead of celebrating excellence, society often settles for the mediocre, leading to stagnation. It is therefore crucial that we cultivate a culture that not only accepts, but values the struggle for self-affirmation. Furthermore, the strength of a society is not based solely on its individual achievements, but also on the ability of its members to support one another. This does not mean resorting to weak compassion, but rather establishing bonds of solidarity that encourage self-sufficiency. By fostering resilience, a community can collectively weather crises, becoming more adaptable and able to overcome challenges. This active solidarity is an expression of the true social strength that Nietzsche envisions. For example, in times of crisis, such as natural disasters or economic hardship, communities that support one another demonstrate a superior capacity for resilience. They do not wait for outside help, but organize themselves and use the resources available to them to rebuild. This approach not only strengthens social bonds, but also empowers individuals to take decisive action, reinforcing the idea that strength and resilience are built together. Building a strong society also requires a continuous critique of the values that surround us. Nietzsche urges each of us to challenge social norms and not accept the dominant morality without question. Critical reflection is essential to the development of a society that values strength and authenticity. We need to be able to discern between what strengthens us and what weakens us, seeking a morality that expands rather than restricts our capabilities. Self-affirmation, as a concept, challenges us to be the protagonists of our own stories. Each of us bears the responsibility of asserting ourselves in the face of adversity and external expectations. This involves not only acknowledging our weaknesses, but also transforming them into strengths. By adopting a Nietzschean perspective, we can see our struggles as opportunities for personal growth and development. This shift in mindset is essential to creating a more meaningful and authentic life. Love of life, on the other hand, invites us to embrace all experiences, no matter how challenging they may seem. By cultivating an appreciation for our existence, even in the face of hardship, we are able to find beauty and meaning where many see only despair. This willingness to love life in its entirety is a powerful antidote to the disillusionment and nihilism that permeate our contemporary society. When we choose to love life, we become agents of change, inspiring others to follow our example.